The Wreckage John had always believed that no matter how bad things got, there was always hope. But as he stood on the desolate planet, the wreckage of a once proud spaceship spread out before him. His belief in that hope was beginning to fade. The ship had crashed without warning, a violent explosion tearing through the sky, scattering pieces of metal and debris across the barren surface. The faint smell of burning fuel lingered in the air, mixing with the acrid scent of melted circuits. And scorched metal. John adjusted the straps on his tattered backpack and surveyed the wreckage. He had been part of the salvage crew, a mechanic who was called in to repair anything that broke down. The ship had been on a routine voyage, nothing out of the ordinary. But now, everything was chaos. The survivors were few, and most of them had already gathered what they could before heading to the nearest base. Leaving John alone in the aftermath, he walked carefully through the twisted metal, his boots crunching on the broken ground. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of the damage. The ship had exploded, but something about it didn't sit right with him. This wasn't just a malfunction. It felt like an attack. "John, you need to focus," he muttered to himself, shaking his head to clear his thoughts. He turned his attention back to the wreckage. His job was simple: find what he could and salvage it. Maybe he would find a way to fix something important. As he walked further into the wreckage, he heard a strange sound, a faint whirring, almost like machinery running. He froze, listening intently. It wasn't the usual hum of broken tech. This was something alive. His curiosity piqued. John carefully moved toward the noise, weaving between the wreckage. The sound grew louder as he approached. It seemed to be coming from beneath a large piece of twisted metal. John crouched down and pulled the debris aside. The sight that met his eyes almost made his breath catch in his throat. Beneath the twisted wreckage was the figure of a cyborg, half buried in the debris. She was sprawled across the ground, her body a mix of organic and mechanical parts. Her skin was a pale shade of gray, her body covered in scratches and scorch marks. Sparks flickered from her exposed joints, but the faint whirring of her internal systems was still audible. John's heart raced. Cyborgs were rare these days. They were once a powerful part of the galaxy's military forces, but now most were abandoned or forgotten. To see one here, in this condition, was both strange and unsettling. He immediately knelt beside her, his hands moving to check for any signs of life. Her chest plate had been cracked, exposing the machinery inside. There was a small screen on her left arm that blinked weakly, showing a faint pulse. "She's alive," John whispered to himself. He didn't know who she was or how she had ended up here, but he couldn't just leave her. John had always been someone who couldn't ignore those in need, no matter how strange the situation. With careful hands, he began to work, using the few tools he had with him to try and remove the debris. It wasn't easy. Her body was heavy, and the parts that weren't damaged were stuck under a large piece of the ship's hull. But after several minutes of pushing, pulling, and cutting, John managed to free her. She lay there motionless, the faint pulse still flashing on the screen of her arm. John took a deep breath. "I don't know what you are, but I'm not leaving you here," he said softly. His mind raced as he thought about what to do next. His first instinct was to get her back to base, but that would take too long. He didn't have the proper equipment here, and it was too risky to move her in such a state. He needed to get her functioning again, at least enough to move, before he could decide what to do. He checked the wreckage around them and found some scraps of metal and tools he could use to make temporary repairs. John didn't hesitate. The cyborg had suffered severe damage, but there was something in her posture, in the way she lay there, that made him feel an unexpected urge to help her. Maybe it was the look of helplessness in her lifeless eyes. Maybe it was the mystery of how a cyborg could end up in such a state. As he worked, his hands moved with precision. He didn't know who she was, but he treated her as if she were someone important. A feeling, deep down, told him that this moment would change everything for him. The connection he felt was strange but undeniable. She wasn't just a machine to be fixed. There was something more about her, something he couldn't explain. With each repair, the cyborg systems began to hum louder. Sparks flew from her, exposed joints as she slowly began to power up. The display on her arm flickered, and then she groaned, her body shifting slightly. Her eyes flickered open, the glowing blue irises scanning the surroundings before settling on John. For a moment, there was silence between them. "Thank you." Her voice was mechanical but with a hint of warmth. John froze, staring into her glowing eyes. "You can talk?" The cyborg's gaze softened, and for the first time, John saw something that didn't seem quite mechanical. "I remember something of my life. Before." Her voice trailed off as if she was struggling to form the words. John swallowed. "What happened to you?" The cyborg didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on her systems. After a pause, she spoke again, this time in a clearer, more human tone. "I don't remember. But I know I owe you my life." John felt a strange tightness in his chest, and he couldn't explain why. "I'm just glad you're okay," he said quietly. The cyborg sat up, looking around at the wreckage. Her head tilted as she seemed to assess the situation. "I don't know where I'm from," she said, her voice calmer now. "But I know I'm here because you saved me." John nodded. "Well, I'm John, and I think we need to get out of here before more trouble comes." The cyborg's lips parted in what might have been a faint smile. "I will follow you, John, wherever you go." As they stood together amidst the wreckage, John couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. A strange sense of connection was growing between them, and he couldn't explain it. He looked at the cyborg, who was now sitting up and adjusting her systems, and knew that this was more than just a rescue. This was the start of a new chapter in his life. Little did he know that Mia, the cyborg he had just saved, would not only become his protector, but also something he never expected. A part of his heart, a dangerous connection. The journey was not easy. John and Mia made their way through the wreckage, navigating the broken pieces of the ship and the dangerous terrain around them. Mia, despite her initial fragility, was quickly becoming a valuable ally. As the days passed, John began to learn more about her and the cyborg technology she was made from. Her movements, once stiff and robotic, became smoother with every hour. Her voice, though still mechanical, showed traces of emotion, and John couldn't help but notice how human it sounded sometimes. But as much as he was curious about her past, Mia seemed reluctant to talk more about it. She often went silent. When John asked her about the memories that had been lost, the silence between them grew, but John didn't press. He respected her space, understanding that perhaps she was not ready to face the truth of who she had once been. Instead, he focused on surviving. They had no choice but to continue walking through the barren landscape. They were miles from the nearest base, and every step felt like they were heading further into the unknown. John couldn't deny the feeling that something was pulling them both toward the heart of the planet. He wasn't sure what it was, but the nagging thought wouldn't leave him. As much as he wanted to focus on getting Mia back to safety, he knew there was something bigger at play. The crash had been no accident. As the two traveled through the rocky terrain, John and Mia came across a dense rocky canyon. The path through the canyon was narrow and treacherous, and John hesitated before stepping forward. "We should be careful," he warned Mia, glancing around at the steep walls surrounding them. Mia's eyes scanned the canyon walls with the precision of a machine. "I sense movement," she said, her voice cold but alert. John tensed. His heart raced as he looked around, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. A low rumble echoed through the canyon, and John's pulse quickened. "What is that?" Before Mia could answer, a shadow loomed over them. The rumbling grew louder, and John felt a surge of panic rush through him. He instinctively pulled Mia back just as a group of armed scavengers appeared from behind the rocks. There were 5 of them, each one wearing dirty, mismatched armor and carrying various weapons. They eyed John and Mia with hunger in their eyes. One of them stepped forward, a sneer on his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice gruff. "Looks like we've got ourselves a couple of strays." John gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He knew they were outnumbered, and he had no weapon. His only hope was Mia, but she was still in the process of recovering, and she wasn't yet fully functional. "Mia," he whispered urgently, his heart pounding, "can you fight?" She nodded, her eyes glowing with a cold, metallic light. "I am programmed for combat." John couldn't help but feel a slight relief. At least he wouldn't have to face these scavengers alone. But the odds were still against them. The leader of the scavengers chuckled, his eyes gleaming with greed. "You've got a cyborg with you, huh? That'll fetch a nice price on the black market." John clenched his fists. "You'll have to get through me first." The scavenger leader raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "That's the idea, mate. But I'm not here to play games." Without warning, the leader lunged at John, his weapon raised high. John ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding a blow. That could have knocked him out. The leader's weapon struck the ground with a loud crash, sending sparks flying. John wasted no time. He threw a punch to the scavenger's midsection, knocking him back a few steps. The other scavengers closed in, surrounding him. John's heart raced as he tried to defend himself. He wasn't a fighter, but his survival instincts kicked in. He kicked out, sending one of the scavengers stumbling backward. But there were too many of them. Mia. He shouted, hoping she could hear him through the chaos. Mia was already moving. She activated her combat protocols, and in a blur of movement, she rushed into the fray. The first scavenger that tried to grab her was met with a swift strike to the chest, sending him flying backward. Mia's strength and speed were incredible, but there was something different about the way she fought. It wasn't just mechanical. Precision. There was a fluidity, a grace to her movements that John hadn't expected. She grabbed one of the scavengers by the arm, twisting it until the weapon fell from his grip. Then, in a swift motion, she took him down, her speed leaving. The others stunned. John fought alongside her, doing his best to hold off the remaining attackers. His punches were sloppy, but with Mia at his side, the scavengers began to falter. The leader of the group, realizing he was losing control, shouted angrily for his men to retreat. "Fall back," he ordered. "This isn't worth it." The scavengers quickly withdrew, disappearing into the canyon. John and Mia stood there, panting, their bodies tense from the fight. John turned to Mia, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're incredible," he said, still trying to process what had just happened. Mia's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "I was built for survival," she said simply. John swallowed, feeling a mix of awe and admiration. He had always thought of cyborgs as tools machines meant for one purpose. But Mia was different. There was something deeply human about her, something that went beyond her programming. As they stood there in the aftermath of the battle, John realized that his feelings for her were growing stronger with each passing moment. She wasn't just a cyborg to him anymore. She was a person. Someone he cared for, and someone who had saved his life. But the question remained, who was she really? And why had she been left behind in the wreckage? What secrets was she hiding? The answers were still unclear, but John knew one thing for certain. Whatever danger lay ahead, they would face it together, the unspoken truth as the sun began to set. Over the canyon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, John and Mia took refuge in a small cave. The battle with the scavengers had left them both exhausted, but there was a sense of relief in the air. They had survived the first real test of their unexpected partnership. Yet, despite their victory, Something still lingered in John's mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was only the beginning, and there were questions he needed answers to. John sat near the entrance of the cave, gazing out at the fading light. His hands were still trembling from the adrenaline of the battle. He looked over at Mia, who was sitting a little further back, her mechanical parts humming softly as she checked over her systems. He had seen how efficiently she had fought, how effortlessly she had taken down the scavengers. She wasn't just a machine. There was something about her that felt human. Mia looked up from her work and caught John's gaze. Her blue eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, seemed to study him for a moment before she spoke. "You seem troubled, John." John sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just the fight. It's you. I don't understand. You're a cyborg, but you don't act like one." Mia didn't answer immediately. She turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I wasn't always like this." John's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Mia hesitated. "I don't remember everything, but I was once human. I had a life before all this, before I became this." She gestured to her body, her fingers brushing the cold metal of her arm. John leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What happened to you?" Mia's face tightened, and she looked down at the ground, her gaze distant. "I don't know the details. My memories are broken, scattered in pieces. I remember flashes of a family, of a life before the war. I was part of something bigger, something important. But then, something happened. I was turned into this." Her voice faltered, and she seemed to struggle with the weight of the words. John's mind raced. He had always known that cyborgs were a mix of human and machine, but he had never encountered one with this kind of self-awareness, this level of emotion. "Do you remember who did this to you?" he asked gently. Mia shook her head. "No. My memories are fragmented. Some are missing. But I remember being used. I remember being controlled, programmed for a purpose. I don't want to be a tool anymore. I want to know who I really am." John's chest tightened as he watched her struggle. He didn't know what to say. How could he comfort her when he didn't even understand what she was going through? She was a cyborg, but she was also someone with feelings, with a past she couldn't fully grasp. John wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. After a few moments of silence, Mia spoke again. "There's more, something else I remember. Before the crash, I was being hunted." John frowned, his confusion growing. Hunted by who? Mia's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and confusion. "I don't know. But they wanted me. They knew who I was, what I was. And they wanted to use me for something. I don't know why, but I couldn't let them. That's why I ended up here. Alone, I ran. And then, the crash." John's heart sank. Whoever was hunting Mia had to be powerful, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. And now they were stranded on this planet, with no way of knowing who their enemies were or how to stop them. "This isn't over, is it?" John said softly, more to himself than to Mia. Mia looked up at him, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "No, it's not over. Not yet." John didn't know what to say to that. He had hoped they would find safety, that they could escape the dangers of this planet and return to civilization. But now he knew the truth. Mia wasn't just a cyborg. She was a target. And whoever was after her wasn't going to give up. The silence between them grew, heavy and thick with unspoken fears. John looked out at the vast landscape, the darkness slowly creeping in. They were surrounded by danger, and there was no telling when the next threat would come. "We'll figure this out," John said, breaking the silence. He stood up, determined to stay strong. "I don't know who's after you, but I'll protect you. I'll help you get your answers." Mia looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you, John. I don't know why you're helping me, but I'm grateful." I don't know if I deserve it. John smiled faintly. Everyone deserves a chance. Mia, you're not just a machine. You're more than that. You have a past, a life before all this, and I'll help you find it. Mia didn't say anything more. She just nodded, her eyes filled with a quiet gratitude. But John could see it, the uncertainty, the fear in her eyes. She had no memory of who she really was, but she knew one thing for sure. She didn't want to be a weapon anymore. She wanted to be free. As they sat in the cave, the night growing darker around them, John realized that he had made a promise to himself and to her. He had saved her life once, but now he would protect her for as long as it took. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't walking away from it. Not now, not ever. Sacrifices made the days past. Slowly, each one blending into the next as John and Mia continued their journey through the barren planet. They moved with purpose, driven by the need to escape whatever had brought them here in the first place. John still hadn't fully processed the weight of Mia's confession. She wasn't just a cyborg. She was a person with a past, someone who had been torn apart and remade into something else. And now, they were running from those who wanted her back. John couldn't help but think of the future. He had promised to protect her, but as each day passed, the weight of that promise grew heavier. Who were these people hunting her, and why? What did they want with Mia? These were questions that haunted him, but every time he asked Mia, she didn't have any answers. Her memories were still fragmented, as if parts of her mind were locked away, hidden behind the cold metal and wires that made up her body. One night, as they sat beside a small fire, John couldn't help but notice how distant Mia had become. Her eyes, once filled with the curiosity of someone learning what it meant to be human, were now clouded with worry and sadness. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames as if lost in thought. John had grown used to her silence, but tonight, it felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Mia? He called softly, his voice breaking through the stillness of the night. She didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, she turned to face him. Her face, though mechanical in design, still held traces of human emotion. "I'm sorry." "John," she said quietly. John furrowed his brow. "Sorry? What do you mean?" Mia hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in her lap. "I can feel it, the danger. It's closing in on us. We're being tracked." John's heart skipped a beat. He knew this was coming. They had been careful, moving in the shadows and avoiding any settlements, but they couldn't stay hidden forever. The scavengers, or whoever was hunting Mia, would find them eventually. "We need to keep moving," John said, his voice steady despite the fear that was building inside him. "We can't stay here. We need to get to higher ground and keep looking for the signal. Maybe there's a way off this planet." Mia shook her head slowly. "It's not just the planet, it's them. They've been watching us. I can feel their presence." Her eyes flickered with a deep, unsettling sadness. "And they won't stop until they get what they want." John clenched his fists, feeling the weight of her words. Mia wasn't just afraid for her own life, she was afraid for him too. He could see it in her eyes. She didn't want to drag him deeper into the nightmare of her past, but there was nothing he could do now. They were in this together. He couldn't turn back. "We'll fight," John said, his voice firm. "I'll protect you. We'll make it through this." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling of doubt. What if they were already too late? What if the people chasing Mia were too powerful? And what would happen to him if he failed? As if answering his unspoken fears, a faint noise broke through the silence. A distant hum, growing louder with every passing second. John's eyes widened as he stood, scanning the horizon. He could hear it now: engines, a ship in the air. "They're here," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "They've found us." John's heart raced. He grabbed his pack and slung it over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of escape. But it was too late. The ship was already overhead, casting a shadow over the land. John turned to Mia, his face hard with determination. "We need to go, now," but Mia didn't move. Instead, she stood there, frozen, staring up at the sky. Her expression was unreadable, her face a mask of calm. "John," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not going to run anymore." John looked at her, confusion flooding his mind. "What do you mean?" "We need to get out of here." Mia shook her head slowly, a faint, sad smile crossing her lips. "I've spent my entire existence running. Running from my past. Running from the people who made me what I am. But I can't run anymore, John. This is where it ends. If I stay, I might be able to stop them. You can still escape, but I can't. Not now." John's breath caught in his throat as the weight of her words sank in. Mia was willing to sacrifice herself for him, to stop the people who were hunting her. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything they had been through together. "No," he said firmly, stepping toward her. "I'm not leaving you." Mia's eyes flickered with a mixture of sadness and relief. "You have to, John. You have to live. You have a future." "I don't. I've never had a future." John's heart shattered at her words. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't let her face this alone, but he knew she was right. Mia was beyond his help. She had already lost too much of herself to the past. "I won't leave you," John repeated, taking her hand in his. "We'll face them together. We don't have to fight this alone." Mia's grip tightened on his hand. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time since they had met, there was a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "John," before she could say anything more, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, armed with weapons and cold eyes. The people Mia had feared were finally here. John stepped in front of Mia, his body tense with resolve. He wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. The leader of the group, a tall, dark figure, stepped forward, sneering at them both. "You should have known this day would come," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "You think you can run forever, Mia?" Mia looked at John, her expression one of quiet determination. "No more running," she whispered, without another word. The fight began. The air was thick with tension as John stood between Mia and the group of armed figures who had appeared from the shadows. His body was rigid, his muscles tense, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't understand why these people wanted Mia so badly, but it didn't matter. All that mattered now was that he wasn't going to let them take her. The leader of the group, a tall man with cold eyes and a scar running down the side of his face, took a step forward. His fingers tightened around the handle of the weapon in his hand. "Mia, you can't run anymore," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. "You know this." Mia didn't flinch. She stood beside John, her expression calm, almost serene, as if she had already accepted her fate. But John could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen before, the fear of being captured, the fear of being used again. "I won't let you take her," John said firmly, his voice steady. "We're leaving, all of us." The leader laughed coldly. "You're in no position to make demands, human. You've already lost." John didn't care about the odds. He didn't care that they were outnumbered. His only focus was Mia. He had made a promise to her, and he wasn't about to break it. Without warning, the leader raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Mia. John's heart skipped a beat. His instincts screamed at him to move, to protect her. He lunged forward, but before he could react, Mia stepped in front of him, her mechanical body moving with lightning speed. "Mia, no!" John shouted, panic rising in his chest, but Mia didn't hesitate. Her glowing blue eyes locked onto the leader's, her expression unreadable. In an instant, she grabbed his arm, twisting it until the weapon slipped from his grip. The others In the group drew their weapons, but Mia was already a step ahead. With swift, precise movements, she took them down one by one, her strength and speed overwhelming them. John watched in awe as Mia fought with a grace that seemed almost human. There was nothing cold or mechanical about her actions. She moved, like someone who had been trained to protect, someone who had experienced battle before. But as John watched, he saw something more in her, the raw emotion behind each movement. She wasn't just a machine. She was a person fighting. For her freedom, for her life. The leader, still struggling to break free from Mia's grip, glared at her. "You think this will end well? You're just a weapon, nothing more." Mia's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and sadness. "I am not just a weapon," she said quietly. "I'm more than that." With a final twist, she threw the leader to the ground, her foot pressing down on his chest. The other figures, seeing that their leader was defeated, hesitated. But Mia didn't stop. Her gaze never wavered as she looked down at the man beneath her. "I am not just a weapon," she repeated, her voice strong. "I am a person, and I will not let you use me anymore." The leader grunted, his eyes filled with hatred. "You'll never be free. You're part of something much bigger than yourself." Mia's face softened for a brief moment. "Maybe. But I'll fight for my freedom. And I'll fight for the life I want." John stepped forward, his heart swelling with pride for the woman beside him. She wasn't just a cyborg. She was someone who had fought to survive, someone who had found strength in the face of unimaginable odds. And now she was free. "Let's go," John said, offering his hand to Mia. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes still locked on the defeated leader. But then, she took his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. Together. As they turned to leave, the sound of approaching engines filled the air. John's heart sank. The fight wasn't over. More of them were coming. "We have to hurry," Mia said, her voice urgent. "We don't have much time." John nodded, pulling her with him as they sprinted toward the cover of the nearby rocks. The engines grew louder, and in the distance, John could see the silhouettes of more ships coming into view. They were surrounded, trapped, but Mia wasn't afraid. She had faced worse than this. She had faced the darkness of her past, and she had fought her way through it. Now with John by her side, she would face whatever came next. The ships landed, and more armed figures poured out, surrounding them. John's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea how they would escape this, but he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when Mia had given him everything. "Mia," John said, his voice low but firm. "We're not running anymore. We'll fight." Mia looked at him, her expression serious. "Together?" John nodded. "Together." The enemy closed in, but John and Mia stood side by side, ready for whatever came next. In that moment, John realized that he wasn't afraid. With Mia by his side, he had the strength to face anything. She wasn't just a cyborg, she wasn't just a weapon. She was his partner. His equal dot as the first wave of enemies charged toward them. John and Mia didn't hesitate. Together, they fought. Mia's movements were precise, her body flowing with a deadly grace. John, though not a trained fighter, held his own, using everything he had learned from years of survival. They fought side by side, their bond growing stronger with every passing second. The enemies fell one by one, but more kept coming. John and Mia knew that they couldn't keep fighting forever. The odds were stacked against them, but as long as they had each other, they weren't going down without a fight. The battle raged on, but in the end, the tide began to turn. The enemy was no match for their combined strength and determination. Slowly but surely, the attackers were pushed back. One by one, they were taken down until only a few remained. With the last of the enemy forces retreating, John and Mia stood victorious, breathing heavily from the fight. But the fight wasn't over. The war had only just begun, and together they would face it.